Time for Arizona's only local sports gambling radio show. Take the Points. Powered by the Sportsbook at CAZ Sports Bar in Casino, Arizona. Your home for uncensored sports betting opinions, analysis, and advice. The guys have you covered for all the games. Now, take the Points on Fox Sports 910 and the iHeartRadio app.
Welcome in. We're back. CAZ Sports Bar, Casino, Arizona. Mike Gross, Mike Bauer, Jackson Groff. Take you up to 1 o'clock today. So glad you can spend part of your Saturday with us. Kind of a rainy day here in Phoenix, Scottsdale area. Jackson and I were walking in to the sports bar together, and it was spitting a little bit out there.
Yeah, it's good to see the weather change every once in a while. You know, put the rain over all of the plants that need some watering.
Look at you.
Even some people too, maybe that are just too hot-headed, need some water on them to cool them down. But yeah, it's a lovely day in Phoenix, but a lovely day to talk sports betting.
So much to get into here as we kick things off at the CAZ Sports Bar at Casino, Arizona. First things first, though, we'll invite you to come out and hang out with us. We're here till 1 o'clock. Check out some of the great food specials. Jackson and I already enjoyed breakfast.
Ooh.
You went off the grid, man.
Yeah, I change it up once in a while. I went these steak and eggs. I don't know who came up with steak and eggs being a great combo, but let me tell you, Gross, it's a phenomenal combo.
You're all in?
All in. It's not, I mean, people are like, oh, steak in the morning? Like, that's weird. But when you have steak with some eggs balanced,
when you have
it's a great
steak
combo.
And you have eggs?
And you got some potatoes and toast here at the CAZ Sports Bar.
You're
Let's go.
Culinary guru explaining that to I had the breakfast sandwich. You know I love it. And they should just have it ready when I get here. That would be the best thing to do. But food is great. Specials, menus on all the tables. The bar is open, ready to go. Great friendly staff out here at the CAZ Sports Bar to take care of you. And then we already checked in with the sports book. Lots of action going on there. People watching the Big 12 championship game on the big screens. They also got the MAC game. It's the MAC game in Detroit again.
It is in Detroit.
So we're going to have to turn that field around for the Lions and Jaguars tomorrow. They also got some basketball action going on. I saw some sad-looking soccer fans walking out when we were getting here. They were a little bit disappointed with the outcome of today's U.S. match, but hey, they made it to the knockout round, so we got that going for us.
Yeah, at least they're moving one step in the right direction. They lost 3-1 against the Netherlands, and you know what they say about 2-0? The most dangerous score in soccer. It's what I read on Twitter. I'm not a big soccer guy, but I read that on Twitter coming in.
Big 12 championship game, 7-7. We'll get into that one a little bit later on, sending our special shout-out to our good friend Dan Minucci, the only Kansas State graduate I believe I know. Kansas State came off, at least here, and I want to talk about this for a second because you sent out a text. The sheet that we have, and it was printed out at 7:30 a.m. here at CAZ Sports Bar. It has TCU as a 1-point favorite as that game was getting ready. That was, 2.5, 3 hours before kickoff, with the over-under sitting at 61.5. But you tweeted out or texted out to us as we were getting ready to do the show. You were watching ESPN and watched that line change right before your very eyes.
Yeah, so what's crazy is earlier in the week, I believe it was a 2.5, 3.5 point favorite towards TCU. And then as the week progressed, maybe words of Adrian Martinez not playing and Will Howard playing instead, maybe the line changed to now it's 1.
Right.
And then after Lee Corso decided to pick Kansas State with his headgear pick,
Lee Corso,
the line switched completely. So it was minus 105, minus 120 for the money line for TCU and minus 1 for the spread. And it flipped. TCU plus 100, TCU 1-point underdog. So I had to jump on it. I bet on USC last night and lost some money, so I'm hoping to win that money back with TCU. So
if you follow us on social media, you know that when we pick games that don't coincide with the time of the show, we always put our picks out ahead of time, so you don't think we're trying to get one over on our listeners. So you can always go and check and see our picks at Fox 910 Saturday. So last night, Bauer did a lovely job with our graphics, and we got the picks out for the Pac-12 championship game. And Jeff Hoodzow, who you'll hear coming up here in about 45 minutes or so, he, along with Jackson and Mike Bauer, all were on USC at minus 2.5. If you would have made me pick, I would have been right there with you guys.
Yeah.
But we also give ourselves the option of taking the over-under when we make our picks. And I said, you know what? I'm not all in. I'm not sold on USC. And I was hearkening back to that game in Salt Lake City earlier in the year where it was a heck of a game, back and forth, but Utah pulled it out. So I said, you know what? I've watched enough of USC's defense this year. Give me the over in that game. So I wasn't sold on either team.
What was the over-under
67.5. And they busted 70, which doesn't surprise me. So that's my way of bragging that I was the only one that got last night's game right. But, again, it was out at kickoff. We put it out there. So this isn't any shady nonsense. Well, if it was shady, we would have all been on Utah and said, wow, look at we're geniuses. Well, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but the same thing this morning with our Big 12 championship game. And we went with the line that we were originally working off earlier in the week. To your point, Jackson, that number has bounced around and changed a lot here this morning. Bauer took the over on that one, and then the rest of us on TCU. But, again, those are on our social media feed on Twitter. Check us out at Fox 910 Saturday.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the Pac-12 game last night. Obviously, Utah winning 47-27. 11 Utah shocking and demoralizing the USC's chances of making the CFP, winning the Pac-12. And I think the biggest storyline here was you could tell Caleb Williams was banged up. He was limping the whole second half. If people didn't see, he had like a lower left leg injury, which affected, as a quarterback, affects your plant leg, affects your ability to run, which he does so well, ability to move around the pocket. And it kind of gets to your head a lot, too. You saw his throws were lower. You saw his throws were high, low, not inconsistent, and he wasn't accurate as he normally is. He still threw for 368 yards, and he had that 2 touchdowns in the second half, I believe, which is insane off of one leg. But when you look at the Utah team and Cam Rising, they got a veteran squad. They got a lot of dudes that have been in the program since they were freshmen up, whereas USC's got a lot of transfers, which has worked for them, except against Utah. So, and then the biggest thing there, obviously, Caleb Williams being hurt was a big one. But on top of that, 25 missed tackles will not win you football games.
Well, and going into that game, and we've seen enough of USC this year to know that even on the best of days, that defense is suspect, right? Lincoln Riley's in there. He's rebuilding. He obviously focused on the offensive side of the ball first. That's where his bread and butter is, and it makes sense. I think in 2 years, this program is going to be just off the charts as they move from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. But last night, you knew that defense, at least I thought that defense was suspect. But what I was surprised by was the offensive line. And I think you're spot on with your analysis of Caleb Williams, his offensive line didn't help him at all. I mean, you saw it down the stretch, and particularly when everybody knew what Utah was going to do to that off. When they pinned their ears back and they were coming, that offensive line had no answers. And whatever Caleb Williams was at halftime, it was a lot worse by the time the game was over. You saw he had blood on his uniform pants. Yeah. You saw him on the bench after the final clock expired. He had a towel over his head, and trainers working on him on the field before he even moved to the locker room. Again, I was surprised at how that offensive line broke down in front of him late in that game. And to me, that was the difference, because I didn't have high hopes for their defense anyways. But that offensive line was surprisingly bad last night.
Utah had 7 sacks last night. 7 sacks.
And Caleb Williams paid the price on each and every one of them.
And then on the offensive side of the ball, USC's inability to cover the tight end. I mean, they had Dalton Kincaid, who was their main tight end, senior tight end, who had 200 yards the last time they played. But they also have other tight ends like Thomas Yasemin, who had that long 60-yard touchdown catch. And you could tell they're just a stronger team. And congrats to Utah, back-to-back Pac-12 champions.
See you in the Rose Bowl, boys.
See you in the Rose Bowl against Penn State, which will be a great game against two teams that are just gritty, like to run the football, and they got obviously veteran head coaches to lead them.
As I said, we're out here at CAZ Sports Bar, Casino, Arizona, just off the Loop 101 at McKellips. Early second quarter for the Big 12 championship game on all the TVs here at the CAZ Sports Bar. 7-7 is your score in that one. 2 games we've not talked about yet today, Jackson, in championship mode, is the game between Michigan and Purdue from Indianapolis. You've got Michigan at a 16.5-point favorite, and the over-under set at 52. We're going to ask Marco D'Angelo about this game. And my thing with Michigan, after watching them in the second half against Ohio State, is, it's Michigan against Michigan tonight. And I hate to be disrespectful, and I don't mean that about Purdue, but the West, we've talked about this all year. There's a huge gap between the West and the Big Ten and the East. And I'd be saying the same thing had Ohio State beat Michigan last week about this game. And so Michigan has to guard against resting on their laurels after a huge win against their arch rival and looking to head to whatever's next. And, if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm showing my team not the game from Las Vegas last night, but the USC players after that game last night to say, look, guys, here's what's at stake, right?
Yeah.
So you got Michigan, Purdue from Indianapolis, and then before that, championship mode continues. Got LSU, Georgia, the SEC championship game. Same thing, a little bit different, though. You've got Georgia at 17.5-point favorite, according to the book here at Casino Arizona. And the over-under at that one sits at 52.
This will be a home game for Georgia, being at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. This is where the Peach Bowl is for one of the semifinal games, so I wouldn't be shocked. Personally, we can debate about this in the next segment. If Georgia stays there for the Peach Bowl, if they win this game, they should win it outright.
Yeah.
52 points is a over-under there. It's just tough because Georgia doesn't play well when they don't play quality opponents, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand.
They didn't play Georgia Tech well. They didn't really play Kentucky well. It was 16-6.
No, you make sense.
So that'll be interesting. And I was going to say, too, Gross, about Michigan Purdue. Purdue's head coach, Jeff Brom, is 3-0 against AP top 5 teams.
No, I'm not.
This is not.
I was 100% serious with what I said. It's Michigan against Michigan. And part of that is, look, the type of kids that go to Purdue, these smart kids, engineers, hardworking. I get it. I totally get it. And, this is a game that Michigan cannot let down even a bit in. All right, one last one before we get out of here and take our first break of the day. Coming up at 1:30 this afternoon from Fargo, North Dakota. North Dakota State and Montana.
Whew.
The Bison, 8.5-point favorite, 51.5. I won't make you comment on that. I'll just throw it out there for your consider. #GoGrizz.
I'll just say the biggest thing is Montana's got to stop the run. NDSU loves to run the ball. They average about 260 to 300 yards a game running the ball. And we saw against Montana State, they allowed 468 yards rushing. So if they can stop the run, they got a shot. But Montana's an 8.5-point underdog. Money line's at 265. I will not be betting on this game, but if they win, I'll be very happy.
You'll be a happy Grizz alum. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. We're going to step aside, but we are out here at the CAZ Sports Bar, Casino, Arizona, just getting started on a rainy Saturday morning in Scottsdale. Come on out and see us. We're here till 1 o'clock. Jackson Groff, Mike Bauer, Mike Gross. Be right back on Fox Sports 910.
CAZ Sports Bar in Casino, Arizona, exclusively on Fox Sports 910.
Rolling along on a Saturday morning, Mike Bauer, Mike Gross, Jackson Groff, Casino, Arizona, at the CAZ Sports Bar, just off the Loop 101 in McKellips. Come on out, say hello, hang out with us for a little while. See the big screens. They got great customer service there at the window at the sports book. And for those of you that are confident and have cash in hand, self-service kiosks right around the corner and a great food and drink menu to go with it. Come on out and see us. We're here till 1. Hey, guys, one of the things we got to look at, because USC lost last night, is what does that mean going forward? We try to predict with a couple games still hanging in the balance, right? You've got TCU and Kansas State currently tied in the Big 12 championship game in Arlington. And coming up in the late afternoon Arizona time, you've got the SEC championship game from Atlanta, Georgia, and LSU. Michigan and Purdue, the nightcap from Indianapolis. And on the outside looking in, waiting to assume that spot vacated by USC last night, is it a slam dunk that it's Ohio State, guys?
Yes.
They're sitting there at 11-1.
Yes.
Alabama fans online making a case for
but they're all idiots. They're stupid.
It's Alabama's best
fools.
win is against Texas, who's number 21 or 22. I don't even know if they're even ranked. And then obviously Ohio State's best win is against Penn State. Easy, put them in.
So let's we don't want to get the cart too far ahead of the horse here. It looks like Kansas State just scored, so they lead this game. Say TCU figures out a way to lose this game.
They're the best. They're the best second half team in the country.
Right.
Even if they lose, they're still in. They're in.
I agree.
They're in. Apologies to Alabama, crazy, Roll Tide fans. Like, look, you lost 2 games, they lost 1, and it's not like it's a UCF situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like TCU, while you may want to think that they're a lower level than the SEC because you're the SEC and you think everybody's below you, this is a Big 12 team that, even if they lose today, only has 1 loss in the Big 12 championship game. Yes, recency bias. Yes, they might have just lost. Again, hypothetically, if Kansas State wins.
Yep.
But it's still a 1-loss major conference team that, oh, by the way, you mentioned who's the best win for Alabama this year?
Texas.
Who did TCU also beat this year?
Texas.
And where did they beat them? At Texas, which is where Alabama beat them as well. So, look, even looking at that, it's apples and apples. There's no way.
So here's the thing for me, guys. You look at this, and one of the most overused phrases when it comes to this time of year with the college football playoffs is chaos. I'm cheering for chaos. No, there is no chaos. I look at this right now. If you look at last week's standings, there's an orderly an order of events that's going to happen here. You can logically say Ohio State should pass USC, and if Georgia, Michigan, or TCU should lose today, they're all 1-loss teams. And what you said about TCU holds for Michigan, probably more so.
Yes,
and also holds for Georgia, probably more so. You cannot make a case that would convince me that Alabama should replace any of those teams.
Correct.
At this point. The only team...
You got 2 losses.
Exactly. The only team that would have even been in the conversation, but Ohio State's in the middle of it, would be, if Alabama should have somehow become the number 5 team in the rankings. But they're not, right? So the 1-loss Ohio State team slides up. And what I don't want to see for so many different reasons is Michigan-Ohio State Part 2 in the first round.
That's where I'm going to ask you, Bauer, is if TCU wins, they obviously stay at 3. If they lose, do they stay at 3 or do they jump to 4? TCU plays Georgia, Michigan plays Ohio State.
How do you move a team 2 spots if they're on a bye?
I think it depends on if it's a close game, TCU stays. If it's like a two-score game, TCU loses. I think TCU moves down to 4, and I think people want to see Michigan, Ohio State again.
Ask your question again about the bye.
The bye. How do you move 2 spots coming off a bye?
How do you not fall if you lose a football game? I counter your question with another question,
especially if
which to me would be, hey, look, if TCU, the number 3 team, undefeated, major conference, Big 12 team, if they lose and they stay at 3, now. Here's what I think it comes down to is this isn't about just what happens this week. This is about they always talk about the whole resume, right? Your body of work. You talk about chaos as being one of the big buzzwords. The buzz phrase is body of work when it comes to the College Football Playoff Committee. This is a committee of human beings. This isn't a bunch of robots and computers and stuff like that.
What?
That has changed. This is now a committee of people that are watching the game in a room, and they're evaluating the body of work. Now, that said, there's politics involved.
Yep.
And Ohio State versus Michigan in the national championship is mind-blowingly awesome. There are very few things in the world of college sports that could happen that would be better than that.
It could be
Alabama,
the semifinal,
Auburn
too.
in the national champion. No, but that's what I'm saying is it can't be. It can't be the semifinals. It happened last year in the Final Four. Duke and North Carolina met in the Final Four, and it melted everyone's faces because it was this confluence of events. But that is a 64-team tournament that got down to that point. This is 4 teams. Even though Ohio State at number 4 is going to be the underdog, probably a touchdown to Georgia, as long as Georgia takes care of business today, and they're 17-point favorites against LSU or somewhere around that. But as long as that's the case, the opportunity, and again, this is where the human element comes, the opportunity for a Michigan-Ohio State national championship is too appealing. We're sitting here at a sports book. That's a gamble that if I'm on the committee, I'm willing to take the gamble if we could possibly set up Michigan, Ohio State in the Natty.
Looking at last week's rankings, number 4, USC already out. They lost to Utah last night in Las Vegas. TCU is losing right now to Kansas State 14-7 midway through the second quarter in the Big 12 championship game. And then you've got Georgia and Michigan waiting in the wings. Georgia, LSU goes first from Atlanta, and then Michigan and Purdue from Indianapolis will wrap things up tonight. And then the picture should be clear.
It's clear in terms of the 4, just where they are.
Once it's all said and done. We're going to step aside here. On the other side, interesting thing to get into on the other end of the college football spectrum. And Jackson and I were talking about this before we went on air, coaching changes. If you're changing coaches for the most part right now, you never had a prayer for the college football playoffs this year. But there's some interesting stories, one locally, of course, another 2 with another one within the Pac-12, which will really cast a shadow over everything else that's going on here if it happens. And then is Nebraska ever going to be relevant again in college football? We'll talk about all that on the other side. Coming back on Fox Sports 910.
back to Take the Points, powered by the Sportsbook at CAZ Sports Bar in Casino, Arizona, exclusively on Fox Sports 910.
Coming up at 12:30, our good friend Marco D'Angelo from WagerTalk.com. Pick a couple of games with us. That's coming up at 12:30. Before we get to that, though, fellas, big news around college football this week. The coaching changes starting to roll in. We had one here locally, a big one in the Big Ten, but I think getting ready to overshadow all of that is Deion Sanders that may be on the move. It's not official so far as I know. At least it wasn't when we went on the air. But it sounds like that Deion Sanders and the University of Colorado, of all places, are in serious conversations to have Prime move from Jackson State up to the beautiful Rocky Mountain right outside Denver, the Flatirons, Boulder, Colorado. And I could not be more shocked. And I still accept the $5 million number that's out there makes sense. Everything else in this scenario makes absolutely no sense to me from Colorado standpoint and from primetime standpoint. But you have, Jackson, some breaking news, it looks like.
Yeah, according to @Pete Thamel, who is a college football senior writer for ESPN.
Rather dialed in.
Deion Sanders and his associates have spent the week recruiting on-field staff, support staff, and transfer portal players to Colorado. While a deal isn't finalized, Sanders has been preparing for his exit to Boulder after the SWAC title game today, which is interesting because – this week you would figure they'd be preparing for the SWAC, but now he's preparing for also Colorado at the same time.
You don't need to as where he's taken that program.
That is true. You don't. Have to
I don't know how much he really needs to be prepared. I mean, and I mean that that is a total respect. Like he has built that program to national prominence that I don't think that conference has enjoyed ever.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, there's no
so. And what I said a moment ago about Deion, he owes Jackson State nothing, and I don't mean it from that standpoint. But what I'm saying is, if you're on the move, I don't get the marriage of Boulder, Colorado, and Deion Sanders. Colorado is awful. I think they don't have a ton of cash. The $5 million. Where are they getting the $5 million? I mean, I know where they're getting it, but that makes no sense.
Really excited
the academics
boosters.
there, you can't get trained. We had the writer from the Boulder Daily Camera on earlier this year. What's the big problem recruiting at Colorado? The way that degree requirements are set, you can't get transfers in and have them be eligible.
But they do have the only underwear model NIL deal in Tommy Brown at offensive tackle. Gross.
There is that.
So they have some relevance.
That's adorable. That is the only bit of good news until hiring Coach Prime. It's the only bit of good news coming out of Colorado football for years.
Help me. What am I missing? Help me understand what the fit is. Why does that make sense?
Money, job, and I mentioned to you guys last week. Look, if I'm Coach Prime, this is a job I don't care about leaving in a year.
No, of course he doesn't.
This is a job I don't feel bad about. There is no tie for him to stay. There's no romanticism to Coach Prime or Deion Sanders as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes. There's nothing there. It's the exact opposite type of a hire of Kenny Dillingham to ASU, where he comes and he says, I'm home. And you know what? Damn it, I believe it. He means it. This is a kid that grew up here. This is a kid that that played high school football until he got injured in Scottsdale. Right. This is a kid that coached at ASU, graduated from ASU, and I say kid because he's 32 years old and he makes me feel old. But Coach Prime has nothing to do other than playing a handful of games on the road at the Broncos over the years. He has nothing to do with the state of Colorado, and it's the exact opposite type of a hire. And if you're Coach Prime and you've got your eyes on Florida State eventually, then this is a good job. It fills your pockets, makes you even richer than you are now. You get to coach with very little pressure. Let's be honest. It's Colorado football. There's no pressure.
If you're in Lincoln, Nebraska today, or if you're in Tempe, Arizona today, or any of the other places that either have coaching vacancies or will have coaching vacancies, because guys are going to get fired, are you like second guessing yourself right now? Is Prime and $5 million worth it for ASU? I don't know. Is Prime and $5 million worth it in Lincoln, Nebraska? I would say unequivocally yes. No disrespect to Matt Rule, because Nebraska went to the Big Ten thinking, we're taking our brand
Yeah, we are Nebraska.
to the Big Ten, and we're going to help.
Lucky to have us.
Exactly. And it's been the exact opposite. They're not even relevant in the Big Ten West right now.
Correct.
And Matt Rule is a nice hire, and everybody says it's a good fit, and he's probably going to do things there. Prime would have moved the needle so much more. And if anybody can afford the $5 million, Nebraska can afford the $5 million. And I would suggest here, even at ASU, and this is not a knock on Coach Dillingham, but if you knew that Deion Sanders was available to a program, except to its alum, that is basically irrelevant nationally, why wouldn't you have at least taken a swing at it?
I disagree, though, because I think Matt Rule, with his experience that he's had, I think people forget that he was a really good coach at Baylor and what he transformed Baylor into what they are in right now. I think
that? That's the number one feather in his cap.
No, I think people only remember him as the Panthers being a bust at the Panthers.
Those people are fools and not paying attention.
You'll be surprised. I think Matt Rule's a great fit for Nebraska. I think they made the right point.
You're misunderstanding what I said, and I don't think it's a bad hire at all for Nebraska.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that as nice a hire as Matt Rule is, the status of the Nebraska football program right now, my question is, would Deion Sanders be a better hire than Matt Rule? It's not a knock on Matt Rule. It's not a knock on Matt Rule's resume. You need something to make you and your program relevant. And Matt Rule's a nice hire. That's it.
Matt Rule is a good football hire. No doubt about it.
But is it moving the needle anyplace other than Nebraska? I don't think it is.
It's probably moving the needle more, in Baylor's neck of the woods. Oh, that was a good.
What about here? What about here?
I mean, Deion here would have been fun. Deion here would have been a lot of fun.
Right? And it's this, and again, same thing as Matt Rule. This is not a knock on Dillingham because it's already happened. It's a signed deal. But I'm just saying, if you knew Prime was out there, take a swing at it. Say, hey, alums, if we could do this,
yes,
we could do this.
Could you?
You don't think you'd get people that never, ever, ever paid attention to ASU football before, and all of a sudden, your first game is getting attention. Whoever they play to kick off next year, you got Prime on the sidelines. When you start camp, when you go to Camp Tonazona, and you got Prime, that doesn't move the needle. And again,
I think the problem with that is that Herm Edwards was the coach here. And that gamble you took on Herm Edwards, the Herm Edwards experience, the Herm Edwards experiment, it makes it so that as the pendulum often swings with coaching hires, in terms of, and we see this more in the NFL that, you go players coach, you go hard ass, you go players coach, you go hard, back and forth. That's the normal pendulum. But here in college, you go with an out of the box hire versus kind of a more conservative type hire. Not saying that hiring a 32-year-old, the youngest head coach in FBS football is a conservative hire, but you're hiring an up and coming coordinator. You're hiring someone that fits that mold rather than let's go with something flashy. Let's go with the guy that's going to bring TV cameras and all that stuff. Herm Edwards was the guy that you hired off of television from ESPN, who did have an absurd amount of coaching experience, let's be honest, when Herm came here. But I think that if the Herm Edwards, let's say that Herm was successful here and Herm retired because he's coached a lot of football and he called it quits and he said, I'm going to hang it up. Now Deion Sanders is, I think, a much more palatable hire than we failed with Herm Edwards and that hire. We're not going to do that again. We're going to pull back the reins, and we're going to go with Kenny Dillingham, the safer coaching hire rather than the flashier Deion Sanders. I think if Herm didn't go the way it did, Deion would have been an option here. I think it would have been fun to have Coach Prime in Tempe. Best party school in the country. Are you kidding me? You get Coach Prime on the sidelines. You got TV cameras
Shedeur
here.
Sanders at quarterback.
Let's go. That would be awesome. But
now you got Colorado.
I'm reading between the lines, too, hearing what you said, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this has been said.
Here you go.
Is the boosters, you would have had to ask the boosters to get the checkbook out again.
Yes.
And that would have, after what they've gone through here this year, that would have been a tough sell.
Yeah, and that would have been a tough sell. And it was nice earlier this week when head coach Kenny Dillingham at the press conference, a booster stands up and says, I'm going to give $1 million to the NIL collective, to the program here right now because of this coaching hire. That would have been I feel like that would have been significantly in terms of the swag that it brings this conference, in terms of a Deion Sanders hire and his ability to recruit, kids that are looking for that kind of, hey, you want exposure? Playing on Coach Prime's team is going to get you exposure, no doubt about it. It's going to bring you a lot of exposure. And in terms of rejuvenating a tired fan base, it would absolutely do that. But Kenny Dillingham is the conservative version of energizing a fan base and bringing a guy home.
Get the merch going, dilly.
September 2nd, Colorado opens up the season at TCU next year. Man,
I'll
the
take
eyes
TCU
on that
to
game.
cover.
The eyes on that game, though. The eyes on that game. Come on, it's just interesting. Like I said, and it's hard, because I make comments like I did, and it's in the rearview mirror, right? So to your point, Jackson, I 100% understand and appreciate why Matt Rule is where he is right now, and he is much more than his tenure as the head coach of the Charlotte Panthers. And look, the buzz around Coach Dillingham here, it's been refreshing. It's been absolutely refreshing. And, what you've done the last number of hires, if you're ASU, hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. Herm, nicest guy in the world, didn't work.
Yep.
Todd Graham, didn't work.
Yep.
Dennis
Erickson
worked
on the retirement plan, didn't work.
Worked for a minute. What was it, year 1 or 2? Got your 10 wins?
Yeah.
But this what's the old saying? If what you're doing doesn't work, try something different. Right?
Yeah, that's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, and Gross, you asked about Deion. Did maybe ASU miss an opportunity here? The day after the announcement, the day after the news of Kenny Dillingham going to ASU, David Shaw resigns at Stanford. I immediately saw people at ASU saying, we missed an opportunity here. Did ASU miss an opportunity with David Shaw? Similar to your question at Deion.
No, because in David Shaw's statement said, I'm not leaving Stanford to coach somewhere else. He may end up coaching somewhere different, better. But you read
after doing a year of TV,
after a year of TV or a year away, I think for David Shaw more so than anything else is what he was saying, and I don't think so, and I would be shocked if David Shaw ended up on anybody's sidelines in college football in 2023. And I think David Shaw would have been a really tough fit here, because you look at the trouble that's still looming for ASU. Part of the reason that it's trouble is because David Shaw was very, very vocal in his criticism of this program and directly criticizing Herm Edwards. And so you got a guy that's blowing up your program, and then all of a sudden you hire him. I don't know how that works, even if he wanted that job. So, hey, we'll step aside here. On the other side, we get Jeff Hoodsaw on the line and check in, see how is Black Friday still going on there? It might be.
a week later.
See how TV sales are going, but also get his picks. That's coming up next on Fox Sports 910.
Points. Powered by the Sportsbook at CAZ Sports Bar in Casino, Arizona. Exclusively on Fox Sports 910.
Welcome back in. Great day here at the CAZ Sports Bar. 14-10. TCU cut into that Kansas State lead. A halftime Big 12 championship game. We'll keep an eye on that one throughout the course of the rest of our show. But regular listeners to the program know this is the time of day we head out to the phone and welcome in our good friend Jeff Hoodzow, bestdealaz.com. Jeff, how you doing?
What up, Jeff?
Boys, I'm excited. We're at halftime of this Big 12 championship, and we get to stop pretending we like soccer. So it's a big day here on the ranch.
Let's go.
Hey, before we get to your picks, we posed the question before the break. We have no idea. Is Black Friday still going on at Best Deal in town?
Black Friday is going on until tomorrow. Tomorrow, Sunday. Yeah. I'm too lazy to take all the price tags down, so we're just going to extend the sales for another week. So
what a guy.
Yeah, you still have a chance. We sold out a lot of stuff, but we still got a lot of stuff still in stock.
So, as the holidays are approaching, Jeff, what are some of the hottest items this year? Because, we see the TV commercials all the time with big red bows on everything. So what are the hottest? You mentioned you're sold out of a bunch of stuff. What are the things that are flying off the shelves this year? What's the hot item?
Oh, big TVs. These are TVs it's like a movie theater in your house. So, 85-inch, 75-inch, 82-inch. The big TVs are selling, but also iPads. People love iPads. Great for the kids. We have all kinds of options in stock now as well. And even outside of Black Friday, I still think we're probably the best deal in town when it comes to pricing. So come on down here. It's like Black Friday every day.
It's almost like you guys have it the best deal in town in the name of your business. It's interesting.
It's crazy how he slipped that in there so nonchalantly.
Hey, well, you guys did it with purpose. bestdealaz.com. Now, for our listeners, this is a great deal because here's the way it works. Every week, if you enter and you beat Jeff, you get a $50 gift certificate. But regardless of that, you're entered to win a season-long prize of a 75-inch 4K smart TV. Ooh. And here's some really good news for our listener, whoever the player is, 602-260-9191, to go up against Jeff. Whoever that listener or contestant is, you don't have to pick USC and lose like Hoodzow already did. You don't have to pick TCU, which Hoodzow already did in that Big 12 championship game. But you only have to pick two games. You got LSU, Georgia, and the Chiefs, Bengals. Those are our last couple games. Jeff Hoodzow first. We'll take a look back. You missed on USC. So did all of us. USC disappointing. Caleb Williams got hurt in the game. Gross looked at me because he had the over, but everybody who had the cojones to actually pick a winner in that game lost on USC. And then for the Big 12 championship, he's getting a phone call right now. Somebody wants a TV. That's it. Someone wants a giant TV at Best Deal in town. But Jeff Hoodzow, TCU, you're on them plus 1.5 because that line swung right before kickoff.
Well, you know what? I'll take it. And we talked about this a little off the air, Mike, but you guys also stink on your football picks. So I feel like it should go both ways here. You're kind of busting on me, but I think you guys stink just as much as I stink.
I mean, on the season, I'm in first, so I don't stink that much. I just stunk recently. Jeff, I did like your reasoning yesterday for why you were picking USC, though. You went USC with your heart, but you really wanted Utah to win. Why is that?
Well, I'm a Pac-12 guy, and I guess I'm a Pac-10 guy now. Back like we're going back in the day. So I always root for the Pac unless it's in Tucson. Then I hope for dysentery. So let's go Utah. Let's go Cam Rising. Let's go Utes in the Rose Bowl or wherever they end up.
All right, this game is looking at about 17 points for our first pick from you today. LSU, number 14. They were 5 last week, but then they lost. Number 14, LSU, taking on Georgia in a, quote, neutral game in Atlanta. 17 points is what Georgia's laying. Who you got in that one, Jeff?
As you guys know throughout the year, any chance that I have to pick against that fraud Jaden Daniels, I take the opposite team. Give me Georgia minus 17 so I don't have to hear about Jaden Daniels anymore. That bum.
All right, he's got Georgia minus 17. You can't throw Jaden Daniels under the bus in this game because we're going to the NFL. Speaking of LSU, Joe Burrow and the Bengals hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs minus 1.5 on the road at the Bengals. This is a matchup of one of the best games we've seen in a long time in the NFL in terms of last year's playoffs. Jeff, what do you think? Chiefs minus 1.5 at the Bengals, over under 52.5.
I love this game, and I love Pat Mahomes. I know Burrow's 2-0 against Mahomes all time, or whatever phony baloney number my sales guys are pitching at me. Give me the Kansas City Chiefs. We're playing big boy football today. Chiefs win by a touchdown.
Big boy football and big deals at Best Deal in Town, bestdealaz.com. Jeff Hoodzow, thank you for joining us every week, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, boys. Have a good one.
BestDealAZ.com. Don't forget, Monday night here at CAZ Sports Bar at Casino, Arizona. You got your chance to come in and watch football, your chance to bet on the game, win cash. The jackpot's up to
$2,900.
Yeah.
Kahunas.
This week it's the Saints and the Buccaneers. Cuban sandwich is the special on the menu for that. Hour number 1 in the books. We'll step aside here. More to come on from CAZ Sports Bar.
Arizona Color Vehicle Wraps.
And for Arizona's only local sports gambling radio show, Take the Points.
Yeah, it was calculated wrong. I don't do math either.
CAZ Sports Bar in Casino, Arizona. Your home for uncensored sports betting opinions, analysis, and advice. The guys have you covered for all the games. Now, Take the Points.
All right, now you're live.
Sports 910 and the iHeartRadio app.
Welcome in hour number 2 from the CAZ Sports Bar Casino, Arizona, Loop 101 in McKillop. Stick with us. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, our good friend Marco D'Angelo from WagerTalk.com joins us. We'll break down some couple of games with him as we do each and every Saturday. But now we head back out to the phone lines. Welcome back to the program. A guy who several weeks ago, maybe months ago, told us keep an eye on Kenny Dillingham when ASU gets around to filling this position. And that's Chris Cartman. He joins us now. Chris, it's Grossbauer and Jackson. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you guys.
Hey, like I said, credit where credit is due. You told us that several weeks ago, and came to fruition this week. Describe for us, Chris, the feeling around this program now, because it feels different. I mean, it's always a great time when you hire your next head football coach. This is always the guy that's going to come in and make the difference and going to take you where you haven't been, all the good stuff that goes with it. There is a lot of that with Kenny Dillingham, but I think there's a little something more this time, maybe something we didn't experience with the previous hires from this regime.
Yeah, I agree with that. You look back, the last several coaches that have been hired, they were not really fan favorites or even known in the case of Todd Graham, really, right? Clem Edwards, Dennis Erickson, those people were viewed as kind of being over the hill, maybe kind of in the twilight of their careers, not necessarily understanding the modern landscape, college athletics, or the Pac-12. Kenny Dillingham checks a lot of those boxes. He was a fan favorite, somebody that they've known, Scottsdale native, ASU graduate. He has a lot of that local, regional, and even institutional knowledge and understanding. And then he, obviously being a younger guy, the youngest FBS coach in the country now by 4 years over Dan Lanning at the Power 5 level, he's connected to younger people, recruiting. He understands NIL. So he has a intuitive and learned sort of perspective that the last several coaches at ASU haven't had and have taken up to several years to actually be able to learn. And by the time that they have, I think it's actually been too late in some of those cases. And I don't know if Michael Crow and Ray Anderson felt like the way that things have gone recently with the NCAA investigation and the historically bad season, that they needed to give ASU fans something that they really craved and wanted, a record low attendance. I'm not sure how much that factored into their calculus, or just understanding that college football has changed so significantly in recent years, which it has. But either way, everybody sort of is on the same page, and this was a pretty good hire, if not great.
Chris Cartman from Sun Devil Source with us, talking about the hire of Kenny Dillingham this week, the new head football coach at Arizona State. And obviously you've got the body of work. You can see the record from Kenny Dillingham every place he's been. That's part of it. How important, though, is that piece that we've been talking a lot about? You mentioned it, that local angle, that local knowledge, the ability to recruit. I'm not even going to say Arizona, the ability to recruit Maricopa County. That's really what it comes down to, which has been an absolute miss for the better part of a decade from this program. How important was that in the decision to ultimately put him in this job?
Significant. I've been covering recruiting for about 20 years now, and really in about somewhere around the mid-2000s, when there became enough sort of saturation of talented high school recruits, that's when a lot of sort of the big players nationally started to come in and recruit the Valley, in addition to, of course, the USC, Stanford, Oregon, Washington schools that had already been in the Valley. But effectively, the last couple staffs, they made decisions that they weren't going to spend a lot of time doing that. And you look around the country, and there's literally no successful college football program that doesn't also have a lot of success recruiting its state or its region, really. I did a study some years ago. It showed that about 2/3 or more of the prospects that were signed by the best programs came within about 600 miles. So there's no way that ASU is going to be able to be successful in any sustained way without doing much better within Arizona and really in California. They've had some years where they've done really well, and others where they haven't been able to do well. This staff is going to be composed to try to recruit the state. Sean Aguano, Charlie Regal, Vince Amy went to ASU, and others that they're going to add, in addition to Kenny Dillingham. And ultimately, they may not get some of these guys the first time around. But what's happened is the migratory nature of athletes, the willingness for those guys to transfer once or twice, that matters from a relationship development standpoint with coaches. If they do leave, there's still a great opportunity to get those guys down the road. And so I just think that Dillingham understands, and he has made clear that he's not going to take any shortcuts on the relationship development part of it. He's going to offer scholarships to kids early, stay connected with them and the local high school coaches. And that really should pay dividends, even if it's going to continue to remain difficult to recruit the highest profile kids locally because of the history being what it is.
Chris Cartman, the publisher of Sun Devil Source. You can follow them on Twitter at Sun Devil Source. Chris is on Twitter at his own name as well. But sundevilsource.com, that's where you got to go for all the great info. Hey, Chris, you just referenced Charlie Regal. That was Kenny Dillingham's head coach when he was playing in high school at Chaparral. And now he's going to be on the staff. Who else has Kenny Dillingham added to the staff? Big news from Sean Aguano, sticking around, staying on the staff as well. Who's already sticking around in terms of coaches and players? And what work does Coach Dillingham have to do right now? What's on his to-do list?
Yeah, so the biggest hire, I would say, has been Bo Baldwin. Not been announced by ASU, but that's a done deal. He's going to be the offensive coordinator. Some people may be familiar with the name. He at Eastern Washington for, I think, 6 seasons. He won a national championship, 5 Big Sky championships. Went on to be the offensive coordinator at Cal for a few seasons. The last year that he was there, they won 8 games under Justin Wilcox. Then he took the head coaching job at Cal Poly. They haven't done well. There was pandemic. He inherited that program in 2020, so that's pandemic. Makes it a little bit difficult to gauge. He's going to call plays, but it's going to be Dillingham's offense that he brings, which really is sort of an evolved sort of view of the Mike Norvell offense that was probably the most successful that ASU's had over a multi-year period in recent history, going back to that early Todd Graham years when they won 8 games, 10 games, 10 games. So that's a big development. The defensive coordinator job has not been determined. That's probably going to take another several days, maybe a week or so, I'm hearing. And then there's some other candidates for some opening positions. I think that from Oregon, where Dillingham was, there's the potential, just underlying potential for Adrian Clem, who's their offensive line coach at Oregon. He has a home in the Valley, and he's told me years ago that he would love to be able to coach at ASU at some point. So you can't rule that out. And then also Demetrius Martin, whose son Cole Martin is one of the top local recruits in the 2023 class at Bassa High School. I think he's ranked number 2. And he's committed to Oregon, but Demetrius has a home in the Valley. And so that's clearly would be a target of Kenny Dillingham. So those are some of the bigger positions that are yet to fill. Of course, the DC job. We mentioned Vince Amy. I've known him for 27 years, I think, now at this point, since he was a freshman at ASU. And then Charlie Regal and Sean Aguano, of course, going to coach running backs. There's a lot of smoke, a lot of sort of rumors about the potential of Jason Mons from Saguaro potentially leaving to come on to the staff at ASU. He's focused on trying to take that team to a state championship again, which but if they did add Mons, that would be putting together quite an all-star cast of local high school coaches from the past.
Hey, Chris, when you take a look at him, he mentioned he's the youngest head coach in the power conferences by a wide margin. A 32-year-old, hey, he's young. He can relate with the kids and the way, maybe the way that the NIL is changing, as you mentioned, the migratory ways that players are. But is it also a challenge for a 32-year-old to be hiring a staff of coaches that are 50, 55, that are much older than him? Is that a blessing and a curse in terms of his age as a 32-year-old head coach of a Power 5 football program?
That's definitely one of the more areas of potential concern. I think by adding Charlie Ragle, who's probably 15 years or so older than him, as you said, a guy who has known Dillingham since he was literally 17 years old. That's probably the reason that he got into coaching, actually, when Dillingham tore his ACL. He was going into a senior year of high school, and that relationship plus the Bo Baldwin, he's getting some mentors, some people who can give him some advice, a little bit more lived experience up to and including head coaching experience in the case of a couple of these guys. And it wasn't at the same level, but it still matters. And but I also think that Dillingham is very savvy. I would say he's extremely street smart. He understands how things kind of move and the fulcrum point at which they can bend in your favor. He's been able to figure that out from a relationship standpoint in a way that's actually allowed him to get into this role. He attached himself very early on, smartly, to Charlie Ragle, Mike Norvell, Chip Long at ASU. Rode those guys up through the prominence of college football, Memphis, Florida State. Dale Lanning was also on that ASU staff, so he attached there, which allowed him to become the play caller at Oregon this year. So he's pretty savvy. I think he's older than his years in terms of his sort of understanding of things from a sophistication standpoint. But I also would say that there is no substitute for your own experience, and he doesn't have a lot of it. And so that is one of the things that could potentially hold him back in some ways, and we're going to have to just see on that.
Chris, I got to ask, I'm looking at your Twitter right now, and on the bio, it says you are a Heisman voter as well. And the leader, I guess, before last night was Caleb Williams. He's still the leading candidate at minus 1,900 that you can bet on for the Heisman. Do you think Max Duggan still has a chance maybe at slipping above Caleb Williams in the Heisman race, or do you think it's Caleb Williams at the end of the day, despite the loss to Utah last night?
Right, so there are a lot of voters who wait until the last opportunity to vote, which is this weekend after those games. And so somebody who maybe wasn't watching Caleb Williams that closely all season, like somebody voting on the other side of the country, they might go, okay, well, yeah, might not think that Caleb Williams is the best player in college football. Now, I'm not allowed to reveal who I'm going to vote for, but I can just say that I personally think that Caleb Williams is as good as anyone in the country. There's no doubt in my mind. He had the hamstring injury. He wasn't even close to what he normally is in that game. He only had 3 interceptions all season going into that game. If anybody, to me, it has the upside of a Patrick Mahomes, I actually think it's Caleb Williams. He's somebody who, and we saw covering ASU, I saw in person twice Patrick Mahomes. Caleb Williams is more impressive to me at the same exact stage. Not saying he's going to develop at the same rate or to the same degree, but I think that he's incredible. Also, I just want to say it's a little bit unfortunate that a lot of times some of the best players in the country, because they're not on teams that are in the national championship race or going to be in the CFP or whatever, they don't really have much of a chance. Like, so for instance, like Bijan Robinson to me is a top 5 football player in the country, maybe even top 3.
Yeah.
But of course, you don't get that sort of consideration unless you're the star quarterback or the star running back at a team, for a team that wins 10 or more games, or maybe even 11 or more games at this point. So that's not going to change anything, me putting that out into the ether. But I do think that's important that in the conversations I have with others, that it be sort of reiterated that you got to try to figure out who the best player is in college football.
Chris, you're the best, if not one of the best. As far as I'm concerned, you're the best when it comes to being plugged in at ASU. I want to go back to the Sun Devils in regards to the Kenny Dillingham hire. We talked a lot about him, where he's got to go, what he's already done with the football program. But I want to ask you about the man who made the hire. How much was Ray Anderson involved, and where does his job security stand right now for the Arizona State Sun Devils?
Yeah, he was involved. I don't think that it's not like in past hirings where the AD was the making the decision almost entirely himself or largely himself or herself. The case of
Lisa Love.
Lisa Love was at one point in time the AD. But I just think that when they talked at the press conference about having former Sun Devil greats that they leaned on, Juan Roque or Jake Plummer, and that they had that Marcus Williams was involved, who's former ASU player, and you had Gene Boyd and all this stuff. And then they came to some consensus, is what the word that they said, which I don't even know how you come to a consensus about everybody agreeing on the same thing. But he didn't have anywhere near as much juice, I don't think, in terms of making the hire, although it may be that he wanted Kenny Dillingham. I would say, though, that I think that Ray Anderson had the ability to have a big impact, maybe even the biggest, is the ability to get other candidates sort of knocked off. So, like, Jim Mora, there's some traction about Jim Mora, but Ray Anderson worked with him at the NFL and the Falcons, and I think that was not going to happen due to Ray Anderson's experiences. So, but again, I think Michael Crow was very involved, probably even more so this time around, and it's always nice when you can't blame one person for a hire, right? It seems like that's kind of the way that they're trying to set this up.
He's Chris Karpman, publisher of Sun Devil Source. Great information, and we'll end it where we started. He told us this months ago, or weeks ago anyways.
Beginning of the season.
Keep an eye on Kenny Dillingham when ASU gets around to this. Chris, as always, thanks for coming on a Saturday to share the knowledge. We appreciate it. Let's do it again soon.
Well, Kenny told me 5 years ago, almost to this day, that his dream job was ASU. So I don't think that there's anything false or phony about what it means to him. And if he does get an opportunity, I think he could stay at ASU for a very long time, maybe even decades.
Good stuff. Hey, Chris, we appreciate it. We're going to step aside here, come back, a quick segment, and then coming up bottom of the hour, Marco D'Angelo from WagerTalk.com. We'll be right back on Fox Sports 910.
Sports 910.
You're live.
Thanks again to Chris Cartman for joining us in our last segment. Appreciate him always taking time to join us, break down the hire of Kenny Dillingham at ASU. All right, guys, a couple other coaching news and notes. One follow-up on something we've talked about already. But before we do that, Jed Fish down at the University of Arizona has been granted a contract extension through 2027. The school announced on Thursday afternoon after a real nice year for the Wildcats. I think they went in at the over-under 2.5 wins this year. And
yes, they did. And yes, I cashed that ticket.
Far exceeded that.
Got that over, baby. Let's go.
5-7 after a 1-11 season a year ago.
Fair enough.
I also cashed the ASU under ticket. Hey, you bet with your wallet, not with your heart.
Congratulations to Coach Fish on the new contract. And I was going to ask Chris Cartman if we had more time, his thoughts on Deion Sanders potentially going to the University of Colorado. And again, it's still potential. Jackson gave us an update from ESPN earlier. CBS News in Denver, breaking news about 30 minutes ago. The University of Colorado Board of Regents has scheduled an unusual 10 a.m. executive session Sunday morning, followed by an 11 a.m. public meeting. And the only agenda item on the meeting is personnel matter at CU Boulder Athletics. This is the only meeting in 2022 scheduled for a Sunday, as CBS News Colorado reviewed the entire schedule for the year. So if the Board of Regents is getting ready to meet, then they're going to go out of their way to do it on a weekend, on a Sunday morning. I think big news is coming out of Boulder.
I always find stuff like this intriguing, where you have people scouring the official Board of Regents schedule to figure things out, or this is like when and we've seen this before in terms of coaching hires where people are following the tail numbers on airplanes, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of who's flying where? Oh my God, this plane has just landed in this city, and the next level that people go to try and get scoops like this. To either get it right, or as we saw in the case of Lane Kiffin and Auburn, get it completely wrong from media members. But yeah, the report said that the University of Colorado Board of Regents, a special board meeting tomorrow. I wonder what it could be. Maybe it could be anything. It is virtual, by the way. They have confirmed that according to the website. It will be virtual, so they don't have to go there in person.
Thank God.
Hey, and this story will suck the oxygen out of the room when it comes to the Pac-12 football conversation for this foreseeable future. But I saw this on Twitter, and it really caught my eye because this guy is in Arizona. This guy played college football. This guy played in the NFL. Kerry Taylor.
Wide receiver for the Sun Devils,
people don't realize how big, all caps, big this is. This changes the entire Pac-12. He will land the top players in the country, including players from Arizona. Just like NIL is changing college football, this hire completely changes college football in reference to Deion Sanders accepting the job at the University of Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things. If you've got any kid that wants to go and play and cares about swagger, playing for Coach Prime, that's the swag right there. That's it.
We'll keep an eye on that one. We're going to step aside here. And on the other side, our good friend Marco D'Angelo joins us.
He's got swagger.
He's got plenty of it.
Yeah.
And he joins us next right here on Fox Sports 910.
away from. Take the points, powered by CAZ Sports Bar's resident handicapper. Marco D'Angelo of WagerTalk.com joins us now on Fox Sports 910.
Oh, our favorite time of the week. We head up to Las Vegas and say hello to our good friend and regular contributor to the program. It's Marco D'Angelo. Marco, it's Mike, and Jackson.
Marco!
How are you today?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Hey, Marco, before we get to the picks, you got any stunned, disappointed looking USC fans trying to find their way out of town right now after last night?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of stunts and upset ones. I'm quite happy. I had a rather large wager on Utah last night, so things worked out well for me.
I know they did. We saw that at Marco in Vegas on Twitter. All right. As a Michigan fan, I was telling the guys before, if I'm Jim Harbaugh right now, I'm showing them film, not of the Utah-USC game, but I'm showing them film of the USC players kind of hanging around the stadium there in Las Vegas after the game with the towels over the head, the disappointment. And, I think the biggest issue in today's game for me is Michigan against Michigan. Are they still celebrating last week's big second-half win over Ohio State? Are they potentially looking ahead to whatever might be there in the college football playoffs? But they've got a Purdue team that's, not flashy, not very good on paper, but smart kids, engineers, kids that work hard. And this is going to be I think it's going to be a tough game for Michigan in Indianapolis. I see a 16.5-point line. Michigan's favored, and a 52.5-point over-under.
Yeah, we've seen this line drop a little bit. It was as high as 17, which obviously, a bigger difference of 2 touchdowns in the field goal. But you're right. The biggest concern for Michigan is themselves in that mental state. And, I'm a guy that likes to look at situations, and I talk about, fat and sassy coming off a big win. You don't get any bigger than the win they had last Saturday. And to do it back-to-back years, last year was one thing. You finally got the monkey off your back, so to speak, but you played at home, okay? You're in the big house. But then this year, you go to the shoe, and you not only win, but you slap Ohio State around the way they did. These kids, you saw them on the sidelines. I mean, they were literally giddy. And the one thing that I took notice to, even with the big lead, did you see the pass play in the fourth quarter that Harbaugh called, going deep, for a big play when the game's already decided? They were sending a statement. I just feel that they might have had a little bit too much fun last Saturday. Now, the difference between Michigan in this game and USC last night, even if Michigan loses today, okay, the only thing that's going to be off the table is the undefeated season. They're still in the playoffs. There's no way they drop out. So it makes it a little bit different where you're not playing the life and death situation like USC had last night. On the flip side of the coin, you got a Purdue team with a coach that's had success in his career of pulling off some big upsets against top 5 teams. Now, granted, usually it happens at home, but, not, in a situation in a neutral venue like we have tonight. But I think Purdue, they're playing with house money. They've got nothing to lose in this game. If it's 4th and 3, they can gamble. Whereas Michigan, if there's some questionable decisions to be made in the game, they might tend to err to the side of caution. You hear me use the phrase, instead of playing to win, they play not to lose. Yeah. And that's not something you want to be doing when you're laying 16.5 points. With that said, is Michigan the better team? In 7 out of 10 times, would they cover this 17-point spread? Yes, they would. But given the situation, what's on the line, just having to win with bigger fish to fry down the road in that most satisfying win last week, yeah, I'm going to take Purdue. I'm going to take the points. I'm going to look for them to keep this thing close tonight. Michigan escapes. I know, Mike, you're worried about that. You escape, but I don't think they get the cover. I've got it Michigan 31-20. I'm taking Purdue in the points.
Michigan 31-20. Purdue, and the points, obviously, there's a big number there. There's a big number in the SEC championship game as well. But let's fast forward to tomorrow. This is a rematch of one of the best games of the year last year, the AFC title game. The Chiefs are on the road at the I had to look this up. I'm used to calling it Paul Brown Stadium. At Paycor Stadium, Marco. You got two teams that are streaking. Chiefs have won 5 straight. They just beat up on Arizona's own Bryce Perkins and the Rams last week. The Bengals, they've won 3 in a row, 5 of their last 6. This is a matchup of 2 hot teams. I know we got no Joe Mixon. What do you see from this fantastic game we get to watch tomorrow in the NFL?
Well, you set the table perfectly with the first narrative, and that's where everybody's going to start with, is saying the big revenge game for Kansas City. And, yeah, it is the revenge game. Did they come into that game a little bit, still flying in the clouds from that playoff game against Buffalo last year? We all remember that ending, KC and Buffalo, and then KC had to play the AFC Championship game. But all of the talking heads, including myself, said the Super Bowl or the AFC Championship game was the week before when it was Buffalo and KC, and I think KC believed that. So, yes, a lot of people are on the Kansas City side in this game. I'm not one of them. I like Cincinnati. Cincinnati went to the Super Bowl last year. They lost, and we've talked about it at the beginning of the season, how teams that lose the Super Bowl generally don't do well the following year. Well, Cincinnati started the season 0-2. They did have that hangover effect, but they have put it together. They've won 5 of their last 6 games. I look at Kansas City here, and although they've won 5 in a row, let's be honest about that 5-game winning streak. Yes, they beat San Francisco soundly 44-23 to start that. But if you remember at the time, San Francisco was decimated with injuries, and that was pre-Christian McCaffrey. So big edge for Kansas City in that game. They got the win. Then they played the very next week, Tennessee, on Sunday Night Football. They were a 14-point favorite. Why? Because Tennessee was decimated with injuries, and it took everything for them, life and death, to escape 20-17 for the win. Then they beat Jacksonville. I don't have to say anymore. Jacksonville's Jacksonville. And then they beat the Chargers, in which they had to come from behind in the final minute to pull out the win 30-27, and once again put the dagger in the hearts of the Chargers, who, for whatever reason, always play them tough, but find a way to lose in the end. And then last week, the Rams, all the teams I talked about being decimated with injuries, the Rams are not only decimated with injuries, the team has quit. McVay's lost this team, and they rolled 26-10 in a ho-hum game, just going through the motions to get the win. I don't think Kansas City is as good as their 5-game winning streak might indicate. Cincinnati is playing their best football of the season right now. I'm going to take them. And we talk about Kansas City in the defense. They've given up points at different times this year when they have faced teams that had their full allotment of players. Yes, they're going to miss Joe Mixon, Cincinnati, in this game, but the backup running backs had 2 really good games in a row when he came in for Mixon 2 games ago. So I like Cincy. I'm going to take them plus the points. And you guys like when I bring you a stat? Well, I got one for you.
Here we go.
Kansas City, after gaining 450 yards or more on 3 consecutive games, the next game they're just 3-17 against the spread. We're going with Cincinnati, 34-30. It should be a fun one. Should be a shootout if you want to put a little on the over. We got away with that one last week. It was close, but we got there late. So we came up with the old 3-0 if you did Arizona and the total last week on the play. So let's see if we can do it again this week.
Where does he find these?
Hey.
It's unbelievable. But, Marco, we cannot let you go. I have to ask you about this at Marco in Vegas on Twitter. You tweeted this last night, and I want you to state your case here, Marco. You said, quote, "Not going to be popular view, but I feel a 2-loss Alabama is more deserving than a 1-loss Ohio State." State your case, Marco.
I absolutely believe that. First of all, you've got Alabama. Both losses were on the road. They were a field goal at the gun and then a 2-point conversion in the final 30 seconds to lose on the road by a grand total of 4 points. You're Ohio State. Yes, they got beat by Michigan, but you were playing at home. You got smacked around, and really, Ohio State, who else have they played on their schedule? They had the Penn State win. That's a quality win. And they struggled with Notre Dame at the beginning of the season. I don't think Ohio State deserves it. It's not going to happen. They're going to get in. It would be a travesty if somehow TCU loses and Alabama leapfrogs them, but I don't think that is a possibility. TCU has beaten too many top 25 teams this year, no matter what happens in this game. But I don't like the system's flawed. We're not getting the best 4 teams. I think Alabama deserves it more. In that particular poll that I put out, I asked the public, they lean slightly to Ohio State. It was like last time I looked, the poll was like 52-48%.
He's Marco D'Angelo. Follow him on Twitter at Marco in Vegas. You can vote on his Twitter poll, but more importantly, you can get to wagertalk.com and all the great stuff. And we say this, there's great stuff there, but it's basically a lot of the information is free stuff, Marco. And this is the paradise time of year for sports fans. Obviously, we talk a lot of football when we have you on, but you have experts in every sport. You've got NHL, NBA, college basketball, and even the World Cup. You've got it all covered there at wagertalk.com.
Yeah, that means I don't get a lot of sleep this time of the year.
Always good stuff. Follow him again on Twitter at Marco in Vegas. And again, that website, wagertalk.com. Marco, as always, good stuff. Let's do it again next Saturday.
Let's cash some tickets, guys.
Thank you, Marco.
We need to make that a T-shirt.
Let's do it.
Let's cash some tickets.
Let's do it.
Like,
Marco D'Angelo, always good to catch up with him and get his knowledge and take him to task on his Twitter polls.
3-17 after 450 yards of offense the game before.
3 games before.
3 games before.
Get it right. How do you not know the stat? How did you not already know that, Jackson?
I started to write it down and then my head just started
where do you
spinning.
find? I don't know where you find it, but that's why Marco's one of the best. Golly.
We'll step aside here. On the other side, we make our picks.
I'm not going to have any stats like that in my picks.
I will.
It's not happening.
I was researching this Kansas City Cincinnati game. I got one for you.
Whoa, really?
Is it the one you wrote down from Marco? Wait a second.
Maybe. We'll do that on the other side right here on Fox Sports 910.
back to Take the Points, powered by the Sportsbook at CAZ Sports Bar in Casino, Arizona, exclusively on Fox Sports 10.
Thanks again to Marco D'Angelo for joining us in our last segment, at Marco on Twitter and online at wagertalk.com. And if you missed it, the two games he had with us, the Big Ten Championship game coming up this evening from Indianapolis. He's got Michigan in a tougher game than the line would indicate. He likes Purdue taking the points, but Michigan to win 31-20.
Okay. All right. 31-20 Michigan.
Tomorrow, we asked him about the Cincinnati KC game, and he likes Cincinnati to win this one 34-30. 34-30 is his pick in that one. So thanks to Marco. He joins us every Saturday right here on the show. It's time, guys, for you to stop paying attention to Kansas State and TCU.
Hey, I'm watching the Maction over here. We got the Ohio Bobcats. Play some defense, Bobcats. What are you doing?
Way to put us on
You
blast.
stop a guy.
And allow us to make our picks.
Damn Toledo.
All right,
And
well,
a couple of the games have already either in the books or are underway. But for the purposes of the show, we got them in. We got them in on time. We got them on social media to prove it. But we'll recap them here during our regular pick segment. So, Bauer, take it away.
All right, so Pac-12 championship, we did not do well. Gross, you did fine. Jackson, Jeff Hoodzow from Best Deal in Town, bestdealaz.com, who is the fantastic sponsor of our pick segment every week. We all had USC -3. We all failed miserably. Gross, you had over 6.5. You get to cash that ticket nice and easy.
And
you got a dub already. You're up 1-0 already before we make our picks on the air.
For the record, though, in our pregame when we were texting back and forth preparing for the show, I did say if I had to make a pick that way, I would have taken you. I would have been right there with you guys. So
yeah, but
I get it. But
on the record, you had over 6.5. That's a win for you.
Thank you.
You are 1-0 on the week. We all jumped in on the Big 12 championship game as well. I took the over 61.5. Gross, you, Jackson, and Jeff Hoodzow from Best Deal in Town, bestdealaz.com. You guys all had TCU, and this line moved to +1.5.
that's a good bet.
Which is crazy because when you guys got here and you guys grabbed the sheet, you guys grabbed the piece of paper right here, the one that was printed up this morning, that wasn't the line, and it moved right before kickoff.
absolutely.
All right, so we're all on the record there for those picks. How about our next game?
What are you on the record?
I said I was the over. I had the over
Okay, I
61.5.
right.
Yeah, I started off with that. Thanks for listening.
Well, I'm making sure it's on the record.
All right, 17 points, a big number in Atlanta. Georgia, #1 team in the country. LSU taking them on in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium there in Atlanta. What do you think? Jackson, we'll start things off with you. UGA versus Jaden Daniels and Mike the Tiger.
Well, yeah, this LSU team is up and down. We've seen them play well against Bama the way they did. We've seen them play terrible against A&M. I think this is a good game for Georgia, obviously, being in Atlanta, being the home team, basically. But 17 points is just a lot for me. And a Georgia team that they don't really play well when they play those lower type competition teams, like they play Georgia Tech. They played Kentucky. They only beat them 16-6. I don't think LSU slightly better than Kentucky. Give me LSU, and I'm taking the points, +17.
Oh, it's the name of the show. All right, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the points as well. Look, in games like this where Georgia doesn't need to win, I'm not saying that Georgia's not going to win, but Georgia doesn't need to win. This isn't the BCS. They don't need to make a statement. They don't need to win by a whole bunch of points. Georgia is in the playoff. If they lose by 50 or they win by 50, they're in.
Yep.
So come middle of the third quarter, start resting everybody. If you win the game by 10 or win the game by a touchdown, you're not going to cover. So give me LSU plus the 17. I'm taking the points. It's the name of the damn show.
I'm going the other direction on this one. I get what you're both saying about Georgia, and you're right. However,
Thank you.
Georgia,
Yeah, right.
when the lights are on, when the when the eyes of the world are on them, Oregon, they laid the lumber, right? And I think this is one of those games. Florida, kind of the same thing. That's a rivalry game. So I think this kind of falls into the same category. Nobody watched them play Kent State. Not a lot of eyes on Georgia, Kentucky. but they are the only game in town. It's on CBS. It's got the eyes of the college football world on them.
That's true. That is true.
And this is a really good football team. You talk about some of the storylines we followed all year. Alabama shocking with 2 losses, the resurgence of and then the disappearance of USC. There's never been a question ever about this Georgia football team from the start of the football season. So I'm okay with that. Give me Georgia. That number doesn't scare me.
All right, you're taking the -17. So is Jeff Hoodzow. Our listener Chuck, he's in for the listener spot.
Should have had him come on and announce his own pick.
There you go. That's right. He's now got a chance at a season-long prize of the 75-inch 4K smart TV from the best deal in town. He's got LSU +17. He's also taken the Chiefs -1.5. So is Jeff Hoodzow. Jackson, what are you taking? Chiefs at Bengals tomorrow.
So you got Joe Burr versus Patrick Mahomes. Now, Patrick Mahomes, it's Patrick Mahomes at that point. The Bengals have been up and down this season. They don't have Jamar Chase. So with that, I'm going to Kansas City -1.5. I think the Chiefs are the best team in football right now. Patrick Mahomes playing at an MVP level, which who would have thought he could get even better every single year he plays.
Look, Patrick Mahomes has weapons left and right. So does Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's got weapons. They're coming back healthy. Mixon and Jamar Chase. I say this as somebody who's wholeheartedly going to be rooting for the Chiefs tomorrow. Bengals not only cover 1.5, which they're getting, they win.
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Kansas City's rushed for more than 450 yards in each of the last 3 games, and that is not a good sign for tomorrow. But I'm still taking Kansas City. Sorry, Marco.
You didn't even finish the stat.
I couldn't because I
blew his number. And they also they didn't rush. They had over 450. Either way,
you kind of botched that.
I blew it totally, and that's why I said sorry, Marco. I'm going with Kansas City tomorrow. He scared me with so much knowledge.
Right, exactly.
Knowledge is power, and I'm afraid. Hey, thanks to everybody out here at Casino Arizona. Had a great time. Ryan, good job back in the studio. Don't forget Monday through Friday, 1 to 4, Rock and Mooch with Jimmy B right here on the station. We'll see you next Saturday. From Casino Arizona, CAZ Sports Bar.